Let's talk about launching, because a lot of founders have a couple misconceptions about this topic.
Founders see big companies launch products or services on TV or at conferences and assume that's what startups do. They see companies they still relate to as startups like Facebook, Google, Rent the Runway, and think that's what founders should be doing. But think about this. How many of you actually remember the day that Google launched? When these companies first launched, it wasn't a big splash full of media outreach, expensive parties, and conferences. A launch, in simple terms, is getting users to interact with your product. The second common misconception is wanting the product to be perfect before launch. If you're one of those founders who's stressing about making sure every little detail on your product or website is perfect before launching, stop. Unless you're building a startup in a highly regulated industry like life science or a food company that needs FDA approval prior to launch, you need to rethink what it means to launch a company. We've worked with so many pre-launch companies that worry so much about having a perfect product that it takes them over 6 months to launch. Then they release the product and nobody cares. When you do this, you waste precious time and resources. So in the spirit of always be closing, we want you to think about launching as something you do on a consistent basis. Because your product and company is always evolving. So why wait or think of a launch as the only time you get to put your product in front of users? In this video, we're going to talk about the different ways in which to launch. The items we'll discuss are important because these are things you should be doing while you're in the accelerator. Before you even have a fully functioning product, we want you to practice how you talk about your startup and practice your pitch so you can refine it. So during the program, we're going to A/B test your pitch. This way you can see how peers and mentors respond to your idea. Once you have an MVP or an early version of your product, launching through different channels will give you an opportunity to see how people will respond to that early version of the product. Talking to different people and using different channels will help you determine whether you're even talking to the right users. You might launch on one channel and get no response. Then you'll launch on another channel and you just might get a huge response. Ultimately, this will help you figure out who is your buyer persona. Let's talk about the types of launches you can do while you're in the program. The silent landing page launch. You don't need anything fancy for this. All you need is a domain name, your company name, a short description of what you do, your contact info, and a call to action. So for example, the call to action can be get in touch or subscribe to our newsletter or even subscribe to hear more when we launch. This is a great way to collect interest from potential users. This should be something that if you don't have one yet, do this weekend. The friends and family launch. All right, so if you're at the idea stage, you get to test out your short pitch on family and friends to see how they respond. Once you have an MVP, do this type of launch as quickly as possible. Founders in our community should be considered friends and family. With over 90 founders, it's still a pretty small community, but it's mighty. Ask them for feedback. Share your product with your friends and family and watch them use it. Sit down next to them and ask for feedback. Warning about this phase though, don't stay here too long. While friends and family are great, the feedback can be biased given that they like you and sometimes their feedback isn't quite as helpful as real users. Strangers. After friends and family, you want to talk to real users experiencing the pain point you are trying to solve. Those will be the most useful to you as you continue to iterate. So if you have an early version of your product, there is literally no reason that you shouldn't be launching to your friends and family, as well as peers within the cohort in the next few weeks. But then move on to strangers and people who would actually pay to use your product and give you unbiased feedback. Online community launch. Once you try this with close communities, start looking at other types of online communities. There's the alumni network, for example. You could go onto Product Hunt or Hacker News, Reddit. There's very specific types of community of users like Alpha, a community for women, or even We All Grow, which is a community for Latinas. Or you can just go to Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups. Try any of these. Try all of these. Find the right communities for you, and if you're not an active user, find someone that is and have them make the ask for you. The biggest thing to remember when launching on online communities is write like you talk. Do not give a sales pitch or branding jargon. People hate that. All you need to do is introduce yourself, talk about what you're building, talk briefly about why you're doing it or how you came across the problem. The blog launch. As most of you know, launching to popular blogs that cover your industry or trade can be incredibly powerful. Try this. Google best whatever your company is doing and figure out who comes up on the first couple pages of results. Reach out to those bloggers and tell them about your product, why their community would love it, and if they'd be willing to add you to their list. Don't expect to hear from everyone. Not every blogger will want to post about you. One thing I want you to keep in mind is that some bloggers and influencers are pay to play. When you're in the very early stages of your company, we really discourage you from paying. If folks are asking you to pay, find other creative routes to get around this because as startups, as early stage startups, you don't have the money to do it. The pre-order launch. If you're a hardware or physical product, of course you can do a pre-order campaign. Preparing for the pre-order launch could honestly be a whole separate presentation. And nowadays you can just Google and take a look at some successful companies and get a sense for how they built out their launch strategy. Some of the launch will involve a lot of what we've already talked about and what we'll cover next, like building your own community, email list, press outreach, etc. Of course, there's the new feature or new product line launches. Glossier, for example, is a beauty brand. They're incredible at launching new product. The way they think about it is actually very scientific. They release products on a very specific cadence at specific intervals. For every product, they essentially hit every single launch button again and again. So community, social media, press, advertising. Each time this new product launches, which is basically like every 6 to 8 weeks, they restart the cycle, creating a constant drum about Glossier. One last one. While you're in the accelerator, you should start to build your own communities. You can do this even really pre-product. Start building your own email list. Every person that you meet with and discuss your startup with, even very loosely, add to your email list. That way you can build email updates about what you're working on at semi-regular intervals. While you're in our program, you have the opportunity to talk to so many people about what you're building and ask them, hey, can I add you to my update list? And over time, you'll get that into the hundreds, maybe even thousands. Start doing it now. We're going to skip press launches because we'll introduce how to talk to the media and how to think about PR in a different video. So to sum up, stop thinking about launching as just a one moment in time. Don't spend all your time in our program getting ready for this one big day or even demo day. Launching is something that is a continuous process that you do over the course of the next couple months and into the life cycle of your company. Thanks for listening, and remember, launch already.